is Ground Zero. For most Americans, it has come to stand as a reminder of when a nation and the world watched in shock and disbelief as the United States came under attack on September the 11th, 9 years ago. Today, construction of a memorial center and Freedom Tower are underway, a reminder of and tribute to the almost 3,000 people who died that day. Pabon is a construction worker who took part in rescue cleanup efforts after 9/11. He has documented those days with his own photographs.
See, this is in the beginning. You see this here? This is Liberty Street, looking that way, right?
He still has vivid memories of when he helped remove the rubble of the Twin Towers.
I remember when I was working over there, every time they pulled out a beam and the ashes came down, that was like somebody's body. That was human. I didn't, that was, and it falls on my jacket. I left it alone. This is hallowed ground because of what happened, and it's important that people don't forget.
Never forgetting the victims of what became America's worst attack since Pearl Harbor in 1941. But how to honor them has sparked a controversy which has spread throughout the country and even further. A moderate imam in New York has proposed an Islamic center just walking distance from Ground Zero. The goal? To encourage interfaith dialogue. But not all agree.
This is Josh when he was really little. He was in the country. He was going fishing. He liked to fish.
Judith Rice lost her son Josh on September the 11th. He worked at Cantor Fitzgerald on the 102nd floor of the North Tower.
Our oldest son, Adam, and Jordan.
Judith is opposed to an Islamic center near Ground Zero. For her, it's sacred, hallowed ground. She says she's not anti-Muslim, but points out that al-Qaeda attackers on September the 11th were Islamic fundamentalists. The issue is sensitive.
I think that I understand freedom of religion and I understand constitutional rights, but I also go back to what Pope John Paul II said when some very good Carmelite nuns wanted to build a convent in a dilapidated building at Auschwitz, the Nazi death camp. He says something that sounds good can still be wrong. This is not an appropriate place. Move. And they did. They did not build the convent there. He felt that sometimes even what sounds like a good idea is wrong. It's not a case of being Islamophobic. It's not a case of disliking or hating Muslims. It's a case of this is an inappropriate place for a mosque. It's an inappropriate place for a church. It's an inappropriate place for a synagogue.
This is the building which has ignited the current debate over Islam in America. 4551 Park Place is just 300 meters from Ground Zero. It was damaged during 9/11. The plan is to tear it down and build a 13-story Islamic center of $100 million, which would include a mosque, auditorium, gym, and other facilities. Mostly peaceful demonstrations take place here on a daily basis, but the fear is that a growing national backlash against Muslims could become dangerous if left unchecked.
Donna Marsh O'Connor, September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows.
This concern has led some families of 9/11 victims to form a coalition calling for dialogue and not retaliation.
A greater pain. We've already seen across the country anti-Muslim violence, rallies, protests against mosques. So this is not just a protest.
Talat Hamdani is Muslim. She lost her 23-year-old son Suleiman, who was an emergency paramedic. She worries about the growing anti-Islam movement in her country.
I'm angry, I'm outraged, I'm not surprised, because when Salman went missing, there were insinuations that maybe he was linked with those attacks. And I went through it 9 years ago alone and faced this suspicion and this doubt about us being Muslims, and all Muslims are, categorically bad people and they're all terrorists. So I faced it alone 9 years ago. So now we are facing it as a nation and as a community.
In the New York borough of Queens, a street has been renamed Timothy Welty, a firefighter who died on September the 11th. Since his death, his mother Adele has been to both Iraq and Afghanistan to visit families who suffered from U.S. bombings. She worries that with midterm elections coming up in November, politicians are using Ground Zero for political gains, only making matters worse.
They're moderate Muslims, people who are not extremist in their views, who are not advocating violence. Muslims have been criticized because they have not spoken out strongly against those who advocate violence. But they were speaking out against violence and nobody was listening. Imam Faisal has been speaking out against violence even before September 11th. Here is Imam Faisal, who is one of the most outspoken imam in the country, which is why the government has chosen him to speak in Muslim countries for the United States. And he's being criticized.
This is Faisal Abdul Rauf. He's been criticized for being overseas while tensions were rising in the U.S. and possibly accepting foreign investments for his eventual center. He's also said Washington needs to reach out more to the world's Muslim population to prevent further terrorist attacks. Far from building bridges of interfaith dialogue, the fear is the center will further divide a nation still coming to terms with the post-9/11 environment. A recent New York Times survey revealed more than two-thirds of New Yorkers and Americans as well were against building an Islamic center here.
It is a cultural war in the United States right now. And I think that we have to keep our American identity. And what happened 9/11 was a uniquely American tragedy. And I don't think we need to have more, I don't know exact word, more provocation for there to be anger. I don't think there needs to be more provocation for there to be more divisiveness in our society. And I think that by them putting this mosque there, what they're doing is dividing Americans.
This is the September 11th Garden of Reflection not far from Judith Rice's home. It's another reminder of when this nation stood united in its grief and horror. But 9 years later, cracks in that unity have grown, leaving this country of 300 million increasingly divided over a national identity said to be built on the principles of freedom of speech, of religion, and of tolerance.